Linda has built a career from humble beginnings to become one of Britain's most recognizable business leaders, and is now empowering others to successfully start and run their own companies too. So welcome. A huge thanks for joining us. Over to you, Linda.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I think I'm probably talking largely to a ladies' audience. So for the few gentlemen, forgive me if I just say, bring on the women. Ladies, it's our time. So my talk today, I don't give talks, boring long talks about charts and graphs and all kinds of statistics that you may not want to hear. I'm from the true grit of business, and I feel that my job today, if I succeed in my talk and the questions, is to inspire you because inspiration is what I deal in. I started from a very young age, and I started as one of the few women in business of my time. We are in a very different place today, ladies, because it is our time now. But I want to first tell you my feelings about you, ladies and gentlemen, who are in the military. We are in new times at the moment. We've come out of a pandemic, and during that pandemic, many people have had to pivot. Many people who thought they were in jobs for life have had to change their career. They found themselves after 20 years redundant, looking for new careers. People who had to stop their businesses for 1 or 2 years, they had to think out the box, how to get on, what to do. So we're in a changing world. So because you're in the military coming into civilian life, you're just on the same level as many, many people. But you have different gifts, because being in the military, you have transferable skills, I'm sure. And you have the ability for teamwork, which is so important in life, whether you're starting your own business, whether you're going into employment. You also understand how to follow instructions, how to take orders, how to get the job done. And these are vital. These are vital things in business, right? And they will take you through into your new civilian life. And I have 6 or 7 things which I think are very important. And these are important, ladies and gentlemen, whether you're going into your own business or whether you are going to work for someone else, whatever your career dream is. So number 1, recognize opportunities. Recognize them. Everyone has opportunities, but you have to have a go. If you don't buy a ticket, you're never going to win that lottery. And that means have a go in whatever that direction is, but have a go and recognize the opportunity. It's so important. Number 2, you've got to have a vision. Don't be afraid, right, to have a vision. And you can dream as big as you like, but the goals have to be realistic, and you have to take things step by step. You can never bite everything off all at once, not in a job, not in a business you're starting. Take it slowly. Dream as big as you like, but take it slowly. Be open-minded to what comes along. Be open-minded to what comes along in life. Have your feet on the ground and don't be afraid to have a go, and use common sense. You might think saying use common sense, what's she talking about? Of course we use common sense. Believe me, I've been interviewing candidates on The Apprentice for 7 years now, and you would not believe the lack of common sense, right? So I'm telling you now. If you're creative, right, show your creativity and always show initiative in whatever you're doing, whether it's for yourself, whether it's for your boss, in your team. Show you've got initiative. Don't be afraid, because if you've got initiative, try it. What's the worst thing that can happen? You can just fail. That's all. And that doesn't matter, because a failure today will set you up for success tomorrow in whatever area you're in. And if I've always had my own businesses, but I've employed lots and lots of people. And if people have initiative and they have a go, I applaud that. And Surround yourself with support. Now, you're going to need a support team. Everyone needs support, whether you're a mother and you're now going into business and you're worried about your children, whether you just need help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I have never been afraid to ask for help. And I love people who come to me and ask me for help. And perhaps lastly, but most important, believe in yourself. Have confidence. Find what you're good at. Everybody's good at something. Assess what you're good at and have a go at that. But most of all, believe in yourself. Confidence, ladies and gentlemen, is everything. Do not be afraid, right? And coming from the military, I'm pretty sure that is a natural, that should come naturally to all of you. So I'm going to start my journey and tell you a little bit about my story. It's filled with messages, and later on I'll take the Q&A, which hopefully I can answer any of your questions. So I have to take you back, many of you know this, but I have to take you back to a young girl of 15, 14, who had no education and no money. My parents were very, very humble beginnings, and we started life off on a market stall in a northern town. And I knew pretty early on, when I went to work for my mum on a Saturday in that market stall, that I had a feel for business. I loved trading, I loved buying, I loved selling. I never knew where life was going to take me. I was young, and it was different times because my journey has been long. But I knew that I wanted to be in business. We got that market stall and we sold stockings on that market stall. And it was good. My father was a tailor. And then an opportunity came along to take a market stall in Sheffield. Now, Sheffield in the early years that I'm talking about was a very, very busy town. It was a steel town. It was a wealthy town. There were no Brent crosses, no supermarkets, no White Rose, none of that. But Sheffield had an indoor market, an indoor centre similar to Brent Cross, but with stalls open 6 days a week. And we got an opportunity to get a stall. Believe me, it was for me, it wasn't a difficult decision, because I knew even as a young girl, it was an opportunity, but we had to take risks. We had to take chances. We had to borrow money to have that leap, to take that stall, because this wasn't 1 day a week. This was 6 days a week. My mother had to give up her job as a secretary. I, at 15, said to my mother, I don't want to be at school anymore. And in those days, my mother didn't think to say to me, have an education. She just said, okay, leave school. And that was it. I said, I want to work in the business. And that's what I did. And we took that market stall. We borrowed money off my grandfather, who was an immigrant. And that was a lot of pressure, because he gave us his savings. And I knew if we didn't make a success of that, we would not only be a failure at the business, but it would jeopardize my grandfather. So off we went, and we sold we couldn't just sell stockings, we sold ladies' handbags, we sold ladies' jewelry. We had to have a go, had to diversify, had to look, what do I think will be good? What will be good at this? I'm hoping that during this, while you're listening to my story, you're learning messages about life, because I learned messages just as I just went along. Anyway, one stall turned into 3, turned into 5, turned into 7. We ended up with 14 shops all over West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire. We had Sheffield, we had Rotherham, we had Doncaster, we had Bradford, we had Leeds. Indoor market stalls and shops selling. Now I progressed to ladies' fashions, didn't just stay with the hammers, progressed to ladies' fashions. Took a warehouse in the centre of Leeds fashion area to distribute to my 14 shops. Along the way, let me tell you, ladies, I got married at 17. I was a mother at 18. I had 2 children at 21. So I had 2 kids and I was running a business. But I had support, I had help. My mother helped me. Once I'd made a little bit of success, I could afford to get a nanny. But let me say this, because I may get questions about this, right? I never felt my children suffered, right? I gave them quality time, maybe not as much quantity, but I gave them quality. I have 3 grown-up sons who have grown up to love and respect their mother. I laid the foundation for their life, and anyone who's got to run with children and a job in the civilian world, I don't know what it's like in the military world, don't be afraid. Your children will be better. If you're successful and you work hard and you show them the right method, you will give them a great grounding. Remember, in my book, it's been a success. Quality, not quantity. So off I am with all these shops, and I now open a wholesale business. And now I'm selling my goods. I'm buying from our shops. I'm selling in my wholesale business. Suddenly a friend says to me, Linda, I've got a friend in Hong Kong. I love knitwear. Fashion was my passion. Fashion, style, homes. I've done a lot. I've had 4 careers, but fashion was my passion. And he said, Linda, I've got a friend in Hong Kong. He has a lot of quota, because in those days you needed quota. And he's looking for someone to support in England. Would you like to make a journey to Hong Kong? And I said, yes. I was far less afraid now than when we took the market stall in Sheffield, because now I had a business. I thought, what have I got to lose? If I don't have a go, well, then I won't have a go. I won't know. Don't buy a ticket, won't win the lottery. Off I went on a plane to Hong Kong, met the guy. And by this time, with my business, I could buy 2,500, 3,000 of a style. So I thought, well, doesn't matter. I didn't go out to build a brand. I didn't start off, I'm going to build a brand, I'm going to float a company. I didn't. I just moved as I went along. An opportunity came, I took it. An opportunity came, I took it. I went around Hong Kong. I saw all the factories. I saw styles being made for America, Europe, Australia. I wanted to take these styles. I can sell this. Let me alter it. Let me choose. Let me do this. Let me do that. At the end of 2 weeks, I had a range. I had a range of clothes that I loved, clothes that I didn't think were available in England, not for the prices I could sell them at. And then I thought, wow, this needs a brand. That's how my brand came. Right. Feminine. What's my USP? I tell the apprentice candidates time after time, have a USP. That is what's unique to you. What's your goal? What makes you different, right? And that's important. That's an important lesson in wherever you're going in your next career. So anyway, I launched my brand and I gave it a name to match the feminine styles. I called it Honeysuckle, brought it back to England. It was an amazing, amazing success. I was sold out before I'd even had a garment, pre-sold everything. Went back to the Far East, ladies and gentlemen. My agent said to me, we have to go to Korea. Korea? I didn't know where Korea was. Absolutely. All right, well, let's go. Nothing really prepared me for Korea, because ladies in listening to me today, women, second-class citizens there. In fact, if you were a woman, you couldn't work. If you were married, you were just considered nothing. Here am I landing in Korea, 1 hotel, curfew, right? Oh my God, I thought, what is this hellhole I've come to? But it wasn't a hellhole. It was the paradise for knitwear. And here comes my first big break in life. And by the way, stop me when you've had enough of my story and you want your questions, because I can just talk on and on about my journey. But take the lessons in this story. I went into a factory and I saw the most amazing sweaters I'd ever seen. They were just fantastic. There were ribbons and embroidery and diamantes. And I said to the factory owner, I want these sweaters. I want them. I want to buy them. I can only buy 3,000 of a style. I want them. He said to me, no, you can't have these sweaters. I said, why? These are for a lady called Maria Kim in America. They're her designs. So I said, well, let me meet her. Let me, I don't want them for America. No, you can't meet her. Well, she's in New York. Well, isn't there anyone? Well, her husband is here, Nam Ho Kim. Well, will he meet me? Oh, no, he won't meet you. He doesn't meet women. What do you mean he doesn't meet women? Anyway, I drove the factory guy mad. And in the end, there was only 1 hotel. So he was staying at the hotel. He said, right, he'll give you 30 minutes at breakfast. Right, 30 minutes at breakfast. I've got to persuade this man to give me the rights to these sweaters. How am I going to do it? What's my strategy going to be? Right, honesty. I like honesty. I like honesty when I'm employing people and they tell me, I don't know that, but I want to learn. So I thought, right, I'm going to be honest. So I met him at breakfast. I said, look, I've started an importing business. I am not the biggest in the world. I'm not gonna deliver dinner at breakfast. I'm on the starting, but I think I can sell your sweaters and I would like you to give me the opportunity. I don't know how many I can sell, but I think I can sell them. Please, please, will you let me have them for England? I don't want them for America. And he said to me, yes. And he gave me a commission basis. And I said, okay, I will pay you X percentage. I think it was 15% or I will pay you 50%, but I want a downward scale. If I sell so many, I want that commission to go down, down, down. I didn't know how many I could sell. He said, okay. And as I left, I said, and by the way, can I have Europe? I didn't have a single customer in Europe, but I thought, well, don't ask, don't get. Another lesson. Okay, you can have Europe. That many people ask me, what was the turning point in my life? Well, that was one of the turning points. I took the sweaters back along with my winter range. I bought 30,000 of those sweaters initially. I ended up selling 390,000 of those garments and took the commission down to 3%. So that was really an incredible moment in my life, a turning point. I had now built a very successful brand. I took my brand to London. I opened a showroom in London because, as you can all hear, I'm a northern girl, true northern girl, but I did open in London, took my goods to London and had every major multiple in the country on my stand, plus Europe, plus some of the biggest stores in Europe. So didn't ask, wouldn't have asked, wouldn't have got. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead. I'm running a successful knitwear business. I get a phone call one day, would you like to would you like to sell your business? Okay, well, I didn't know, do I want to sell my business? I thought, it was a big company. They had 20 other companies. They said, you can carry on, just work exactly as you want, but we will buy your business and you can run it and you'll just come to London every half year for a report. I sold my business. So I had sold my business. By the time I was 29 years old, I had sold my business. I had gone from nothing to being a millionairess. But millionairess is not the point I'm making here. It was a journey, and it was a journey women didn't take. I sold my business, and 18 months later, the company who bought my business bought an insurance company, got into a lot of trouble, and I took my business back. It was a bit of having my cake and eating it. I took my business back, and I continued my fashion business. Along that journey, someone approached me who had an electronics business. They said, look, Linda, we think we've got potential. Potential is a very important word in life. Every single one of you have got potential. Find out what your potential is. I've got potential. I need someone to guide me. I think I can build a good electronics business. I didn't know about electronics, but I knew it was a variation of a theme of what I did know about. It was an importing business, but I trusted the guy that I backed, who I made my partner. I trusted him because you can't do everything yourself. As I've said, you have to have team building. You have to trust other people. I backed the business. I trusted him. He had never made a penny. Year one, that business made £250,000. Year two, it made 600,000. Year three, we made 1.3 million. Phone call comes along. Do you want to sell the business? Well, now I'm sure, sell the business. We sold the business. We sold it to a major electronics company. The guy that I backed stayed on. I exited the business because they had a board. And just by the by, the business never made another penny after I exited. I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but just saying the facts.
Linda, can we take some? We've got to take some questions. Not very often.
Yeah. Yes. Happy to take questions.
Not very often I get an opportunity to butt in from one of the advisors.
As long as it's not too military, happy
No,
to
they're
take
not.
any.
They're not. They're not. Your enthusiasm and energy at this time of the morning in the States is infectious. That's the comments that are coming in. But someone's asked, Jules
Yeah.
Prentice has asked, when you're interviewing someone, what are the golden
Yes.
rules of your do's and don'ts at an interview?
Well, first of all, first of all, it's good to have a good CV. So that's very important. Before I interview them, I read their CV. Okay. So when you interview someone, as I've said through this talk, you've got to be honest. Come smart, come groomed, come like you're going to look the part. Depending what job you're going, if you're going for a high fashion job, come like you know what fashion's about. But always come smart, always come groomed, always look the person right in the eye. Try and do some research as well before you go for the interview. Try and even research a little bit about who's interviewing you, so you know about the job. Be honest, show you've got initiative, show you want goals, show you're ambitious, show you've got drive. Be honest. If you can't do it, say, no, I can't do it, but I want to learn. I like honesty. I like people who are direct. Just muster up your personality and show you've got some gumption and some go. These are important things. Don't come with pie in the sky, pipe dreams, and show you know what you're talking about. This is what I like. This is why, obviously, I'm not the queen of mean as you see me on the television, but when a lot of the candidates come with these pipe dreams and unrealistic goals, just research, be honest, don't be afraid, don't be scared, don't show your nerves, and never ask how much holiday I get, because that's not your first question to go in with. Research the business, show you want to work hard, show you want to succeed, show you've got potential. That's what I look for. That's fun. And that's what you've got to find in yourself.
Unfortunately, we are getting short of time. We've got a tight agenda. But Linda, someone's asked about how do you ask for help when you need it, particularly when you're balancing a family and starting something new?
Well, you need a support group. Don't be afraid to ask for help. You have to find someone to help you, to mentor you. I can't say who you ask, but don't be afraid to ask. And there are groups. I'll try to get some links of support groups over to you after this interview. But everyone needs support. So don't be afraid to ask. And depending what your area of support, what's required, I'll try to get some various links. And also after this interview, if people do have questions for me, someone can email me and I'll try to help.
Brilliant. Linda, we'll take you up on that offer because there's so many questions that have come in and unfortunately we're short of time.
Okay.
That was really inspirational. Thank you so much. That was unbelievable. I hope so. I know that's had a lot of synergy with our armed forces community, and when we first met, that really hit home for me. But we'll put those links in the after comms to our delegates, so don't worry, you won't miss out on those. And we'll fire those questions over to you as well.
I'm more than happy to answer any questions and help any, and I hope I've been inspirational to the military, and good luck with your life as civilians. It's going to be great. And it's my honor to actually talk to the military because I'm very patriotic. I'm proud of our military and our forces that protect us every day.
Oh,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda.
That's
amazing. Brilliant.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Someone's telling lots of things coming in that I'm awesome. Well, thank you very much. I'm just an ordinary northern girl who made it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
So we're now going to move on to our next speaker, our inspirational speaker from the armed forces community. And that's Jules Park Robinson. Jules, welcome to Women into Employment. Great to see you again. So Jules is a former British Army officer, is head of global investigations at GlaxoSmithKline Consumer Healthcare and chair of British Wheelchair Basketball. Jules, it's really good to see you again. Welcome, and over to you.
Thanks, Johnny, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I think we've got some slides coming. I couldn't go without slides, but they're just pictures, don't worry. Great, thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I've only got 10 minutes, so it's going to be a whirlwind tour, but when we get to the end, please do drop questions into the chat and I can connect with people afterwards. At the beginning of 2019, after a 20-year career in the British Army, I made a really difficult decision to leave. And as an officer in the Royal Military Police, I'd experienced a really highly rewarding, successful and diverse career, including leading the largest deployment of the Special Investigation Branch since World War II in Iraq in 2003, instructing at Sandhurst, Tri-Service Police collaboration with the Metropolitan Police on Up Olympics during London 2012, and also commanding the Special Investigation Branch Regiment. But on reflection, I don't believe I had a clear plan of what I wanted to do next, other than use my knowledge, skills, and experience to be a force for good in some way. I was really fortunate to have some brilliant support writing my CV, which got me some really big interviews quite early on in the resettlement process. And initially, this gave me huge confidence that I was aiming at the right level, but I had a number of second place finishes, which caused me to reconsider. In hindsight, my search was fairly unfocused. I had lots of ideas of what I might want to do, but it was a somewhat scattergun approach, which included more than 15 applications for the civil service without making it through a single sift. So in 2019, I took my first civilian role at a social impact organisation, which was focused on diversity and inclusion. On paper, it ticked all of those boxes that I was looking for. It was so far removed from my previous working environment, as you can imagine. A small team, mostly half my age and all female. But despite all of these differences, the most important one that impacted on me was that I was taking on a new role without defined parameters or goals. Now, I was really excited by that opportunity to shape my own role, but the reality turned out to be something completely different. So as an army officer, I was used to changing jobs every 2 years, assimilating information quickly, conducting analysis of what was required. But in contrast, this new working environment had no experience of that way of working and didn't really know how to respond to me. And instead of making the most of that opportunity and what I could bring, I was kind of pigeonholed and micromanaged, and I felt untrusted to make any decisions, despite on paper the perceived authority to do so. And this lack of empowerment became really overwhelming for me. I felt constrained, excluded, and without value. Now, on reflection, I am sure that some of this was down to me and my slowness to adapt to life outside of uniform. But I also know that the very skills and experience for which I think I was employed was stifled and left untapped. And it resulted in not only a quick and ungracious exit from the role, but also a real dent in my confidence and self-esteem, which took many, many months to regain. Having resigned then 10 days before lockdown, I hadn't banked on being out of work and the mortgage needed paying. And a few days later, I found myself in Watford A&E, being told that stress was a factor in a bleed into a thyroid cyst, which was restricting my ability to breathe. Moving forward, fortunately, I was quickly offered the opportunity to work for a few months within the parent company, and I grabbed it. I liked the people, I felt that I could add value, but like many people, starting a new role during lockdown was really tough. I found it really difficult to demonstrate the breadth and the depth of my skills within what was quite a narrow but focused role. And therefore, when 6 months later, I was offered that same role permanently, but with a £17,000 pay cut, I was left feeling again disheartened with that sinking feeling of what next. My confidence was at rock bottom, and I was a shadow of the woman I had been just 12 months previously. And I also started to believe my own hype, that I wasn't good enough, that I'd overestimated my value, and maybe, just maybe, I shouldn't have left the army at all. So I was absolutely determined that my next opportunity was going to be backed up by intellectual rigor. And in my defense, it was up to a point. So I had 3 offers of work on the table, all at about £20,000 lower than I had been earning. But I convinced myself that at the tricky time of furlough and people losing their jobs, I should be really proud of myself for being offered these roles and grateful for the opportunity. So the SWOT analysis was conducted, it was color-coded by a potential employer, and the die was cast. And the head again overruled the heart, and I started another role, my third in 12 months. 6 months later, I found myself unexpectedly grieving the loss of my dad. My husband deployed overseas for what was meant to be 6, but ended up as a 9-month tour. And the summer holidays were looming while I was a lone parent working nights. And I was no longer a shadow of my former self, I was broken. Not 2 years from leaving regular service, I found myself in the darkest place I've ever been, the magnitude of which is something that I've only just admitted to those closest to me. And I share this with you today, not for sympathy, but because I genuinely believe that exposing our vulnerability helps us to heal and grow, and I don't want you to repeat my mistakes. So what happened next? Well, the week of my dad's funeral, a former colleague sent me a job advert. She felt it had my name written all over it. Now, I wasn't prepared to make another move unless it was absolutely the right opportunity. The cover of COVID only goes so far on a CV. So this time I did my due diligence properly. So I cast my net wider. I connected with people already at the company who knew about the role. I was direct. I asked them what they were looking for, what the challenges and the opportunities of the role were. And most importantly, I wanted to test the culture and ethos of the organization. Every company, as you know, has a code of conduct and values, but did they really live and breathe them? And was it somewhere that I would be proud to work and where the ethics were a mirror image of my own? And the opportunity at GSK ticked all of those boxes for me. So I made the decision that I wanted the job and I went all in. I wrote my covering letter about the role, carefully articulated the challenges and opportunities it presented, and then explained why the person that they were looking for was me. 3 months and a lot of sleepless nights later, I was offered the job. And 5 months in, I'm still enjoying it and looking forward to staying there for a good while yet. So for me, GSK has delivered the culture, the purpose and the ethos that I was looking for, and genuinely values the experience of service personnel and those in the wider community and what they can bring. So when I was asked to talk today, I was really worried that my tale of woe might not be very inspirational, but I was also really keen to share my story to help others and draw out some of the key lessons from my experience, some of which I believe we fall foul of more often as women. Can I just have the next slide, please? Thank you. So the first one of these is know yourself. Who are you and what are you offering? And I know you're going to talk about brand later, but for 20 years, I was defined by my job. Hi, I'm Jules and I'm an army officer. It was my identity. And when I took my uniform off, I literally felt naked. And to be honest, I didn't really know who I was underneath. And it took a lot of time and effort to work it out. But more recently, it's really helped me target opportunities that I'm comfortable with and enthusiastic about. I wrote it down. What were my values? Where was I prepared to compromise? And what were my red lines? The second bit is know your motivation. And Linda mentioned this earlier. And it seems really obvious that you need to know your motivation. But particularly if you're leaving the military, know why you're leaving. Challenge your thinking and test it. You can guarantee that others are going to make assumptions on your behalf. So I lost count of the number of senior officers who assumed I was leaving to spend more time with my family. Now, clearly, I'd like to point out that I love my family dearly, but that absolutely wasn't why I was leaving. Some of my closest friends left to be more hands-on at home, and many of you as military spouses may have chosen that path or indeed had that path laid for you. But personally, I chose to leave because I felt that I had more to give than the opportunities that were available to me at the time. And I wanted to establish myself in a full and rewarding second career in my mid-40s than trying to do it later. I'm still as determined, hardworking and ambitious as I was when I was serving. Now, there's no right or wrong answer to that question, and every reason is a legitimate one. But be honest with yourself, as it will help shape your next steps. And once you're comfortable with your own motivation, be honest with others that need to know it. I didn't correct those who thought I was changing direction to spend more time with my kids. And in not doing so, I continued to let external factors shape my identity and direction. I let other people label me rather than writing my own narrative sooner. The third one is know your worth. So for 2 years, I've settled for less. And despite believing that I would play hardball, I'm yet to negotiate properly on my salary, a cardinal sin and one that I'm slightly embarrassed about. So I've made that mistake several times and I promised myself I won't do it again. Don't take your rank or your salary as a benchmark for where you should be on the outside world. Don't assume that because you've had time out to raise a family or follow your spouse that you're worth less. You absolutely aren't. And don't let employers, and there won't be any on this call, but don't let employers try to pay you less because they know you might have a military pension or cheaper accommodation. Experience and wisdom have a value of their own, and don't undersell yourself. The fourth one is do your homework. Again, this seems really obvious, but it's more about, you can't just read about a potential employer online. You've got to do much more than that. And you need to find people that will tell you what it's really like to work there, warts and all, And again, check and challenge yourself. So if you've completed the first 3 parts, know yourself, know your motivation, know your value, this step can still be the deal breaker. So there are about 500 people on this call today. Each one has a military connection, and yet none of us are the same. So if you're doing by what I did, speaking to a few veterans in the hope they were going to confirm my biased view, I sabotaged my own thought process. Because in hindsight, some of the veterans I spoke to in some of the roles that I took were nothing like me. We had different knowledge, different skills, different experience, and in some cases, different values. And just because they might enjoy a particular working environment doesn't mean that you or I would. And then the last one, and Linda's mentioned this already, is accept help. So I was absolutely adamant I was going to prove everyone wrong and I was going to do it on my own. And I should have asked for help earlier. Now, the wonderful thing about women is that for the most part, we want to see each other succeed. I am not a natural networker. It doesn't come easily to me, but it's an essential skill if you're going to get the opportunities that you deserve. Create that inner circle of trust, those closest to you that are going to speak their mind, and then a slightly bigger one, those who respect, who you might be more likely to believe because they're not actually your spouse or partner. And trust me, that's happened several times. And then make new connections in a wider circle. Reach out to people. The worst that can happen is they ignore you or say no. And while military connections are a good start, you need to connect beyond that to get a truly balanced picture of any potential new role or organization. Now, I'm conscious that my time is up, so I want to finish by just reminding you of the skills that you've got, that you gloss over, so that you have them in your mind when you're going to rehearse your elevator pitch. So there are many skills that we have that we take for granted, and you need to shout about them. So even the doctor said to me yesterday, oh, I can always spot a military spouse when they walk in here because you're so pragmatic. I think I was telling her that I wouldn't see her again because we were moving house again. So please remember that you are much more resilient than you think. You're comfortable with ambiguity. You roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. You're flexible, you're loyal, you're hardworking, and you're connected to an incredible support network. I really hope that you find all of today extremely useful, and please do connect with me because I would love to help you. Thank you.
Oh, Jules, that was phenomenal. The comments you'll see in the chat box illustrate that as well. So thank you so much. That was amazing, really was, and generous of you to offer to connect too. Well, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by RAF veteran Michelle Osborne, who's the Executive Director for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion and Head of Emerging Talent and Military Veterans Affairs for the EMEA region at JP Morgan, Army veteran Angela Owen-Obiey, founder of Women in Defence UK, and Pavita Cooper, founder of More Difference and Vice Chair of the 30% Club. Welcome, panelists. So if I could just quickly start with our panelists for a brief introduction. Let's start with Michelle, followed by Angela and then Pavita. Can you just introduce yourselves to the guys and why you're here supporting the event?
Oh, thanks ever so much, Johnny, and good morning, everybody. I'm also calling in this morning from Washington, DC, so it's early in the morning here, but it's an absolute pleasure to be invited to be part of this panel. As Johnny said, I've got quite a convoluted role in JP Morgan. I left the Royal Air Force I did 23 years in the Royal Air Force, and I joined JP Morgan 4 years ago, initially to head up the Military Veteran Affairs office in EMEA. I was the first person to be appointed as head of Military Veteran Affairs. And then about 3 years ago, the head of region asked if I'd become involved in the emerging talent team as well. And that's essentially everything that we do with young pupils at schools to prepare them for really successful careers. And we run our own degree apprenticeships. And we also do a lot of work to help socially mobile pupils from underrepresented groups. And that naturally led to me then becoming part of the diversity, equity and inclusion team in JP. So that's a pot shot of who I am and what I do. And I very much look forward to speaking to you all and taking any questions that you have.
Thank you, Michelle. And more to come from JP Morgan at our event on the 25th of May. More on that later on. Angela, great to see you again. Welcome.
Hi, Johnny. And I'm going to admit to the usual imposter syndrome, thinking, what am I doing here on the executive panel? But anyway, I'm Angela Owen. I'm a former Army officer with an Army career that spanned over 30 years. When I left the Army, I founded and run the independent group Women in Defence UK. That was about 11 years ago. And why am I here today? Well, I'm actually here to say, please listen to all of the incredible opportunities from outside of the defence sector. You'll hear lots of them today. But please also consider still defending the nation by staying within the sector, the defence sector, perhaps within a different part of the sector, because defence needs more women and we can't afford to lose the few that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Pavita, good morning. Welcome. If you just like to say hello to everyone, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back. I was at the same event giving a keynote address last year, and I really enjoyed it. So I was thrilled to be invited back again. I had a 30-year career in a range of large global corporate organizations. For the last 10 years, I've worked as an independent advisor to boards, helping them think about how they diversify their talent into the most senior levels, but particularly at board level. I'm also a non-exec director on a number of organizations, listed, non-listed, including the intelligence services, and a charity, which is the Prince's Trust and also the Old Vic Theatre. But mostly now, these days, I'm a campaigner, and I campaign for greater diversity, both race and gender, across UK PLC.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So let's get off into our first question for the panel. And that is, the organisational barriers and the institutional obstacles facing women are well documented. The armed forces recognise this too, of course, and it is starting to change, with role models and senior women being more visible, with men allied to this need for change too. But what has been your experience? Are things really changing for women? So let's start off with Michelle, please.
Thanks, Johnny. I think that's a really complex question. And I think, through the course of my career, I joined the Royal Air Force in 1996. So things were very, very different then. But it was fabulous to see how that organisation changed over the course of the nearly 25 years that I served. I think coming to JP Morgan was a revelation for me, not just because it was a big corporate investment bank, but because I saw such amazing positive role models in senior women in the business, running their own multi-billion-dollar businesses. And, men as allies is absolutely fabulous. And I've got a number of senior men who've been extremely supportive to me. But when you actually see women who have spent a career and built themselves to those sorts of positions, it's an absolute fact that you can follow it. I feel like, our organisation is super committed to removing those barriers. And if I think about some of the work we do in emerging talent, it's very much ensuring that underrepresented groups get the access to meaningful opportunities. It's not just about a job. It's about actually reaching potential. And I think that's what we're all focused on, really, is ensuring that, whatever your background, whatever diversity stripe you advocate for, you actually have a meaningful opportunity to reach your potential.
Thank you, Michelle. Angela, what's your take on things?
Rookie mistake there. So as context, I was commissioned as an officer in 1976, so a very, very long time ago, in the days where officer cadets were still taught flower ranging and not to sprinkle your salt, and could only serve in the Women's Royal Army Corps. So from a perspective of 45 years, have things changed? Absolutely. All roles are now open to women. You don't have to leave on pregnancy. And in theory, at least, a mother could become the Chief of the General Staff, in theory. More recently, I would say there's been a deliberate move within the MOD to look for barriers to women's progression and retention. The appraisal process has been reviewed, alternative and flexible working arrangements have been introduced, and please can more men take those up? And there is finally a recognition that when it comes to uniform, women are not small men, and hopefully won't have to dress in effectively their big brother's hand-me-downs for too much longer. And it's wonderful to see women like Air Marshal, now Dame Sue Gray, Major General Sharon Naismith, and Rear Admiral Jude Terry make it to 2 and 3-star. But if you look at the stats, that's still a drop in the ocean. 2-star upwards, so Major General upwards, across the forces, there are about 130 men and about half a dozen women. Now, it is better at brigadier level, where there's about 300 men and 20 women. So the women are coming, that it is working its way up. But what still needs to change? We need to change the seemingly entrenched belief, backed up by armed forces policy, that childcare is a woman's responsibility. How is it backed up by policy? Well, the armed forces maternity leave and pay, I think you get a year, up to a year's maternity leave, and an awful lot of that on full pay. Paternity leave, and important paternity pay, is 2 weeks. What message does that give to men? And what message does that give to women about childcare? We need to reach the stage, in my view, where the development that takes place during career breaks of whatever form, childcare, secondment, sabbatical, is seen as valuable by the armed forces. And as an example, looking after children develops your organizational and planning skills, your patience, your powers of negotiation, your resilience, and ability to function on very little sleep. All skills that are valued or would be valued or should be valued by any organization, if only they were recognized. And we need to get away from a rigid career path where if you take time out, you're doomed to playing catch up forever. And that currently hurts more women than men.
Wow. Those stats are really stark. Pavita, you described yourself as a campaigner. Have things really changed with all your various campaigns?
I think they have. In the last 10 years, there's been a concerted effort by a number of organisations, campaign groups, by the media, by women, by society more generally, to create change. And we've seen some intervention. So the gender pay gap, I think, has been a big influence in women understanding for the first time that in many instances there is a gap between where they're paid and their peers are. So they're asking that question. They're recognising that probably they didn't do a good enough job negotiating on the way in. And this is something I've known for a long time. So I think that's helped. I think things like the Davis report, which is now called the FTSE Female Lead, looks at the representation of women at board level across all listed businesses, and that's very much in the public domain now. So I remember 6 years ago when we ended up with a number of all male boards where the FT were putting the photographs of those boards on the front page of the FT and shining a light on those boards to say, come on, what is going on? But there are other things as well. There's generational shifts and there's the impact of the pandemic. So young men today entering the workforce want to see themselves as equal partners when it comes to parental responsibility. So they are taking up some of the really generous benefits that are available. So most organisations have moved away from just maternity leave to shared parental leave. So that leave can be shared 50-50 between both partners. And in some organisations, that's very generous. It can be up to a year's full pay. So I think this notion that it's only the woman that is responsible in some organisations is starting to shift. It's definitely in the more junior roles. It's much, you don't see it more at the higher levels, at executive level. But I think the other thing that's changed is in the pandemic, we saw so many challenges, the women's progression moving backwards because the responsibility of child rearing fell to women yet again. We saw men rushing back to the office in droves as opposed to women who were still stuck at home while the schools were still closed. So we definitely saw a regression in some areas, but the thing that has fundamentally changed is the construct of where work is done. So nobody is going to revert to the way that we all grew up and expected to work in big corporates, which was being present 5 days a week in a really traditional model of sort of 8:30 to 6, whatever. That just isn't happening. Even young people, even Gen Zs, are telling their employers, if you force me to come back, not 2 days a week, but more than 2 days a month, I won't come. So this huge revolution that has happened in 18 months, what would have taken perhaps 20 years to happen, has, I think, been a real advantage to the world of work, because what that means is that particularly for the currently women for whom a lot of that responsibility falls on, there is this opportunity to work differently. I was with a really large organisation last week where someone said to me, what's great, it's not just women, but you see men now publicly writing in their diary, on Thursday, I'll be leaving at 3, picking kids up from school. And it's not just childcare, they'll be saying things like choir practice or football practice, or they're more prepared to bring their whole self to work. And so I think this redefinition of work and how it happens and what it means to individuals and how they want to integrate their lives in a broader way is a positive thing.
Oh, brilliant. I'm so glad you mentioned board representation. We've got the Director General of the Institute of Directors finishing off the day. So, and I know that's something he's very passionate about. Angela, if we could turn back to you, please. Obviously, after your army career and now a successful one in business too, how have you changed how the MOD and your sector itself recognises the potential of women through your work? What are those barriers that you've identified that you've started to chip away at?
Thanks, Johnny. I'd like to talk about two things, both of which link back to a society, or where a society is heavily dominated by a single gender. So I'm not having a go at men. But when you are in a minority, and women are in a minority in defence, it's really hard to be authentically yourself at work. You want to blend in, you want to be part of the team. And sometimes that means adopting either the behaviours or the leadership style of the majority. Now, those may not be how you would behave, how you would lead in an environment with a different diversity split. That's bad on a few counts. It's bad for you as not being able to be your best self at work, and having to be someone else takes a huge amount of effort. And it's hugely bad for the organization too, as it's not accessing the real diversity of thought that all organizations need to be able to thrive. Our Women in Defence Awards are in their 7th year. They culminate in a dinner at the Guildhall when all of the finalists are celebrated and the winners are announced. Why does that matter? Why do we need separate awards? Lots of reasons. It means that women are celebrated for their achievements as women and are held up as role models for other women. It helps women to see that they don't have to be a man or behave like a man to succeed in defence. You can be authentically yourself. And really importantly too, as lots of senior male officers and chief executives are in the room, it says, look, just look at these women. They are absolutely brilliant. So what are you doing to help them progress? What are you doing to retain them in the sector? The number of men who come to me after the dinner and say, okay, I didn't get it before. I just didn't get it. I do now. How can I help? The second thing I think is development. Training is often designed to work for the majority in a community. It costs more to design it to work really, really well for minorities. In our sector, that means that training could be said to be designed to suit men, because men overall are 80% in defence. There is growing evidence that women learn in different ways, and I know that I'm hugely stereotyping, but women tend to listen to instructions more rather than just dive in regardless. And I'll cite flat pack instructions as an example. So we believe that women need a space to dare to fail, away from the office and away from their colleagues who statistically are likely to be men. So we run masterclasses and they're run by women for women. And just one example, we work with RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, and we run virtual and face-to-face sessions on things like how to change your status in a room, how to influence people, how to improve your impact. And we're just bringing in a new one called Presenting Made Brilliant. The added bonus of these sessions is that it brings women from across the sector together. So you could have someone from Defence Prime, like BAE Systems, talking with someone in the Royal Seagulls and learning from each other. The energy and noise level in the room after the RADA sessions is just indescribable. Now, both of these initiatives, the awards and masterclasses, encourage women to be authentically themselves and give them the space to be authentically themselves, which helps both the individual women and that helps their organizations too.
Brilliant. No, do look up those programs on women in defence as well. And we'll put out the links to the organisation in the post-coms. I'm going to turn to Michelle, and obviously well-documented RAF career, but let's focus on your corporate role, if we may. You focus on emerging talent. Can you tell us a bit about the positive impact of your work with emerging talent, and what can the military recruiting pipeline programs that we know of learn from this? What kinds of programs and events are working really well for you? and how do they help people progress?
Thanks, Johnny. And, you know, I've got the privilege of heading up military veteran affairs and emerging talent. And we have programs that run, you know, under both umbrellas. But one of the things I'm really keen to do is, as you say, to ensure that we build the consistency and the robustness of our approach. So when we think about emerging talents and engaging with young people at school, one of the things for me is around consistency. It's around that multiple touch point, about going in and giving young people the opportunity to understand our industry, understand a day in the life, what it really means. And I brought that across into our military transition programs. So we run a program each year. This year we started 63 military and professional athletes on the military transition program across 6 locations across Europe. And I say that not to try and fake what we're doing, but just to show the amount of growth that we've had. And the reason that it's so successful is that the engagement with our participants over the course of a year or even 2 years. So it's not a cold shock of jumping into a role in JP Morgan. And we put a huge amount of effort into reaching out to our respective communities, whether that's school-age students, whether that's military leavers or professional athletes, and running a number of insights and giving people the opportunity to ask those questions that you might not want to ask in a forum of 350 people. So we run a number of smaller events that are very intimate. As I said, we bring some of our fantastic role models across. So from a military perspective, we bring women who've maybe been through the program in the past year or 18 months, so that we can have a really honest and transparent conversation about the lived experience. And I see that there was a question actually from someone that came in, you know, should you be focusing on the sector or the role? I think there's a little bit of both, but when I talk to anybody that is going through a transition from the forces, I said the most important, and this was me, and it took me, you know, a good year to realize this. So, you know, take the fast forward as a compliment from me, but, you know, really understand what your motivations are. Do a lot of work with yourself to understand what your true purpose is. Because if you can find a role that 90% of the time, or you're happy with your role most of the time, nothing's ever perfect, you know, you will find a sense of purpose and satisfaction. And then you can start thinking about what sector you would like to do that role in. And I think that's really important. In terms of our program as well, I think what's really important for both our, you know, school age pupils, our military and our athletes, is that whole piece around support and mentoring. You know, it's, you know, you can't just bring a group in and just plop them in their roles in the business. There has to be that ongoing support. So the buddies, the mentors, the learning and development is super important. You know, upskilling people, giving them the tools of the trade, you know, helping people upskill so that they can start generating impact in the places where they're actually working. And I think with that builds confidence. You know, I didn't land in JP Morgan and suddenly feel super confident as an executive director. It took me a good 6 months to a year to really grow into that role, to generate the confidence around me, and to generate, someone was talking about USP earlier, but sort of to generate your own brand. And I know that, you know, you'll be hearing about brand later. So there's some of the sort of reflections really about our programs, but it's about that consistency, that mentoring, and that ongoing learning and development that I think is all important to really building a platform for success.
Thank you, Michelle. We're going to turn to Pavita in a second, but before we do, we've got a couple of questions about awareness of the menopause within organizations and support for that, and also about the Prime Minister and the gender pay gap. But before we do that, Pavita, of course, the 30% Club, you're a global business campaign aiming to boost representation at board seats and executive leadership. How's the UK measuring up in response to your campaign, and what more needs to be done?
Well, we started in the UK 11 years ago, and at that time, board representation for women was sort of languishing around 11%, and we far exceeded 30%. In fact, we get challenged to say, well, why don't you change the name to 50%? But as you say, we're a global campaign, and we work with chapters around the world where they're still struggling at 10%. So our aim is to get better representation globally, not just in the the UK. So the good news is last May, for the first time ever since the UK FTSE listing started in this country, there were no all-male boards across any of the FTSE 350 companies. Now that is phenomenal, given where we started. However, 2 weeks ago, we dropped off that number because, of course, there is this notion of being one and done. So chairs, boards thinking, well, I've put a woman on, she's done her 3 terms of 9 years. As she steps down, I'll replace her with a man. Now, that could be conscious or unconscious, but it's happening. So we've already lost that position of having no all-male boards. We're already back to the point there are all-male boards. And I think that's what's really concerning, because this is a continual effort. There have been tremendous efforts to get women to get onto boards, which has been fantastic. But what it involved is many women not actually stepping into the C-suite, becoming CEOs or CFOs. And in fact, what they did is they left their executive careers, they leapfrogged over the C-suite, and they went straight onto boards. There's a number of women who've been very successful at board level doing that. So despite this progress at board level, when you look at the executive committee, which is the top of businesses, which, where your most senior military leaders would be, we are stubbornly stuck at around 20%, and we cannot push through for all the reasons that we know, because you need a critical mass. You need a critical mass of over 30%. If you are one woman on the board, it can be a very toxic environment. It's very difficult. Many women use adaptive behavior to be like men, or they feel it's too hostile and they give up and they leave. And many women are leaving not because they can't do the job, but because they want to work in an environment where they can be themselves. They don't have to code switch or over assimilate, and we see that happening a lot. Now, when it comes to race, it's even worse, because John Parker set up a review 5 years ago that said by this year, by February 2022, every company in the FTSE 100 had to have one person of colour on their board. In 5 years, we even missed that target. It's not like people didn't know it was coming, and it's not like there is a phenomenal talent. I meet the most amazing ethnic minority executive talent every single day. But it is harder because many of us have had less traditional career paths. Many of us have not enjoyed the sponsorship or the network of knowing lots of chairs personally. And at that board level, that's how these appointments are made. It's about who you know. It's about whether the search partner thinks of you in a particular way, with your scene in a particular way. Currently in this country, there are no Black leaders in any of the top 3 jobs: chair, CEO, or CFO. I mean, I think that's a terrible indictment on our society, that we don't feel there is anyone with those skills or requisite abilities to do that job, because it's just fundamentally not true. So we've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go. We've got great representation at entry level. Every firm I work with, I spent many years in banking, lots of effort to get 50-50 gender split at entry level on graduate programs. Brilliant, tick. But within 7 years, most of those women have left, because they look at the environment and think, if you join a law firm, you're 10 times more likely to become partner if you're a young man than a woman. Because of course, what happens if you've got to go and win £1 million worth of business and live on a plane? Not that anyone's doing that anymore, but if that's what it requires, and at some stage you want to balance that with having a family, it's impossible. And so many of the career structures were defined by men for men. And as we are gradually starting to deconstruct that, as we're starting to deconstruct the notion of what it means to be a leader, because often if you say to someone, close your eyes and describe a CEO, they're describing a man. And as that starts to break down, as we have more role models, we've now got 7 women in the FTSE 100 CEOs, woohoo, but only 2 female chairs across the FTSE. This is slow progress. So we need to ramp it up and set expectation for young women to see themselves in those roles, which is, I spend a lot of time in schools and at universities and speaking to young women, trying to get them to create aspiration and see themselves at the top of these institutions and organizations.
Great response there, Pavita. Thank you so much. We're going to ask a quick question about gender pay gap, and with organizations being encouraged to actually post salary pay bands for roles, how can women understand that they're actually being paid fairly? Michelle, could we get a response from you on that, if it's okay?
Thanks, Johnny. And I did my homework, actually, and I went and looked up our gender pay gap, and we make a very public statement about it. So just think about the constitution of JP Morgan. So we're 260,000 people globally. So it's absolutely massive. But, we're very, very forensic about understanding how we're constructed. So talking there about women represent half of our global workforce. Okay, but what's really important is that representation piece that we've just heard about women at the higher levels. And in the UK, we've really increased the number of women in senior roles. And in senior roles, I mean the 2 highest levels of corporate grades, which is executive director and managing director. And that's increased year on year. And in 2021, that was just hovering just shy of 26%. And our board, so our what we call our operating committee, we have 40% women represented there. And overall, you know, when we look at the sort of entry level, and I think that's really important because, you know, you can't just focus at the top of the organisation, you need to understand what's coming in the pipeline. 52%, and you know, that's massive. 52% of our graduate and emerging talent programmes are constituted of women, and that's women going into technology roles, women going into banking roles, into markets. So you've really got to think about your organisation, you know, in terms of that flow through, because you've got to feed talented women in at that entry level in order to see them progress into those higher levels. In terms of our gender pay gap, that's again narrowed year on year. And the way that and there was a question about how do we know that, you know, I'm being paid fairly, is that we make it very transparent. So, you know, at that point of recruitment, you know, the recruiter is given a band, and there is a very transparent discussion around that. And we have a concept called value of seat. So there are no wild fluctuations between, you know, someone doing a comparable role. And that's all, you know, being a banker, being highly regulated, you know, that's looked at very, very closely. And it's looked at year on year as well, so that there aren't sort of differences and wild fluctuations in people's compensation year on year. Now, how do we ensure access? We think about how we recruit. So we think about removing organisational and bias, you know, throughout our entire recruiting process. So we have something called diverse slates, where we are really quite hard with our recruiters, that you just don't go to market and find the same candidates that, you know, you've always gone to in the same pools. You have to do the work. You know, you have to go back to that market and you have to find those diverse slates and those diverse candidates. But I think the big shift in JP Morgan in terms of really driving the diversity, equity and inclusion agenda is that we have made our senior leaders accountable. So they run their big businesses. We have tied their own personal compensation to their achievements within diversity and promoting diversity within their own organizations. That's really massive for a global corporation. You know, that really demonstrates that our commitment to really moving this agenda along. So I hope that's helpful.